Okay, I'll be revising on this topic, plants and human reproduction. So as you know, for plants reproduction, pollination need to take place first before fertilization. So most students, they are aware that when the pollens lands on a stigma and there's something that happened. Okay, when the pollen lands on the stigma of the flower, right? This process, the pollen tube will start to grow downwards to fuse the male reproductive cell, which is actually from the pollens. The pollens are from the anthers of the flower, and this pollen tube will carry the male reproductive cells to the female reproductive cells. But sometimes it can be much appreciated to a YouTube video, which I like to share with you now. So just sit back and relax this video on the journey of the pollen tube.
When most people think of pollen, they probably think of allergies and runny noses. While pollen may be the source of our sneezes, it's also the source of our food. Pollen contains sperm, which fertilizes plants, allowing them to reproduce. What ends up on our dinner plates begins when a pollen grain lands on a plant's stigma. Soon after, the pollen grain germinates into a pollen tube, which is a true hero of our story. The pollen tube is an incredible single cell focused entirely on delivering 2 sperm cells to the plant's ovule. To arrive at the ovule, the pollen tube undergoes tip growth, which is a form of unidirectional cell growth. This is a rather exceptional process, considering that the cell can grow over 1,000 times its original length in just a few hours. In fact, pollen tubes are the fastest recording extending cells. After the pollen tube has traveled the entire length of the plant style, it arrives at the ovule, which contains the egg and central cell. Once here, the pollen tube bursts and releases the 2 sperm cells.
So this is the essential part, right? The pollen tube, the purpose is to transport, right, the male reproductive cells to fuse with the egg in the ovules.
For a process called double fertilization. One of the sperm fuses with the egg, creating the embryo that will become the new plant. The other sperm fuses with the central cell, which develops into the endosperm, a nutrient-rich tissue that supports the development of the embryo. This is what we eventually will eat. Wheat endosperm is ground into flour for bread, and the endosperm of corn are the kernels that we eat directly off the cob. These products are global food staples, and we depend heavily on them in order to feed our planet's growing population. As we've seen, the growth of the pollen tube transports the sperm to the plant's ovule, where fertilization occurs. Fertilization allows a plant, whether it's corn, wheat, or another crop, to start growing. So, the success of the pollen tube's journey from stigma to ovule is essential for our food supply system. If this cellular journey goes wrong, we cannot produce major crops, such as corn, rice, wheat, and tomatoes. The growth of the pollen tube is temperature sensitive, so climate change poses a great risk to our food supply. Out of all plant cells, pollen tubes are the most temperature sensitive. In fact, a pollen tube that is fully functional at a certain temperature might be unable to locate the ovule at a temperature only a few degrees higher, resulting in a completely sterile plant.
Okay, sterile plant means that it cannot reproduce. So the next topic when school reopen, right, you will be learning about global warming. So actually, global warming poses a danger for the reproduction of certain plant species. As you have seen here, right, the growth of the pollen tube, right, is temperature sensitive.
For instance, experiments have shown that the pollen tubes of corn and wheat grown at 30 degrees Celsius, 86 degrees Fahrenheit, were unable to successfully complete double fertilization. Climate scientists predict that global temperatures may rise between 2 and 6 degrees Celsius by the year 2100.
So most of you will be 90 years old by then. So actually global warming affects food supply. Therefore, there will be food shortages if we don't arrest the increase in the global temperature and if we don't change anything to the food. So there's two solutions coming up.
So, in many places where corn and wheat are grown, the threshold temperature of 30 degrees Celsius will likely be crossed by the end of the century. This puts us at risk of losing some of our staple foods. So, what can we do to protect our food supply? One solution would be to
Okay, if you notice here, what is this compound here? This is actually carbon dioxide. Two oxygen molecule combine one carbon dioxide. Because carbon dioxide has a heat trapping property, it traps heat. So the more carbon dioxide our industry produce, right, the more heat will be trapped by the Earth's atmosphere. So that will increase the global temperature. So in order to prevent that or to slow down, we have to eliminate or reduce the emission of carbon dioxide. So one way is to use renewable resources like solar energy, hydroelectric power station, and wind energy. And in Singapore, you can see the government is actually encouraging more people to switch the use of electric car or hybrid.
halt climate change by greatly reducing our emission of greenhouse gases, such as carbon dioxide. However, at this point, climate change has progressed so far that it may not be possible to save our crops. Instead, scientists are working to engineer thermotolerant crops.
Okay, thermotolerant crop means thermal means heat. That means scientists is doing something to modify the genes of plants, or sometimes they call genetically modified food, GMO food. In fact, many of us has been eating GMO food. Okay, one good example is seedless grapes. How come got seedless grapes? Because the scientists changed the nucleus of the grape seed, right? So that as the grape becomes bigger, the seed actually dissolve within inside the grapes. So these are called genetically modified food. But because GMO food only produced the last 20 years, we may not know what are the harmful consequences if we eat too much. Yeah, because history is not long enough to see how human will be affected by prolonged eating of GMO food.
To do this, more research needs to be done to understand how each step of the pollen tube journey could be engineered to be more heat resistant. So the next time you sneeze or eat a piece of pizza, be sure to think about the mighty pollen tube and the scientists working hard to protect its incredible journey.
So that's the end of this video. Let's come back to this question here. So the pollen tube, the function, right, is to carry the male reproductive cells to the female reproductive cells. Okay, things to take note of this one. If you notice, if the plant has been successfully fertilized, right, the ovule will develop into a fruit. The ovules will develop into a seed. So if the flower has only one ovule, in the case of like mango, you can see you eat mango, there's one big seed, right? So it means the mango, the female flower of the mango, right, has only one ovule. Whereas papaya, you can see there are multiple seeds, right? It means the female papaya flowers has many ovules inside. So you can use this fact to draw conclusion. Okay, next we continue this part. Okay, this one I will just go through the answer quickly because due to the time constraint, we have about 20 minutes left. So this process B, right, is both pollination and fertilization. So answer is 2. And then this one you take note, she changed the color. Okay, this experiment, they change the color of flower. And then we observe how many butterflies visited the flower at 1 hour interval. So they ask you, what's the aim of the experiment? So the aim is to find out which color of flowers attract the most pollinators. So answer is 4. Let's continue next question. Okay, next. Okay, this is a flowering plant, as I highlighted here. It's a large colorful flower. Because it's printed in black and white, you won't see the color. So, but the hint is here, a large colorful flower. So based on what we can say based on a diagram. So as we know, pollinators are attracted by the color. So answer is 2. The plants rely on animal pollinators. So these animal pollinators can be insect, also can be birds, and even bats, which are mammals. Okay, this part has been cut off. So what is this part called? Part P. So part P is called the anther. Anther contains what? Anther contains pollen grains. So if you cut off, that means there's no pollen grain. So no pollen grain means no pollination. But you can see this part is still intact. So this flower can still receive pollens from another source. So only fertilization can happen. So answer is B. Okay, this part I want you to take note of this, this graph here. It's a mass versus time of this seed. So as the seed leaves germinate, right, you can see the mass of the seed leaf drops. Okay? But the mass of the shoot increase because this part, the shoot, right, will become longer. So as it grow in size, right, the mass increase. Mass of the seed leaf, this part, because it's a food source, it provides food for the germination. So it becomes smaller as the day progresses. Okay. Okay, next, this one is about comparison between flowering and non-flowering, which are ferns. So these are the differences. Okay, ferns reproduce by spores. And next one is open-ended. So which two setup would the seed germinate? Okay, you need to know the factors for germination is the WOW, the wow factor. So you can see there's one, no oxygen, right? So this one cannot germinate. So they can germinate is A and B. Okay, A and B can germinate. So now they ask you to have another setup to find out if seed needs warmth to germinate. So how do you put this answer? So you notice you must put 2 seed, right? So you say, we need a test tube with 2 seed, wet cotton wool, but placed in the fridge or placed in the refrigerator. Okay, so is everything the same? So you say we need a test tube with 2 seeds, wet cotton wool, but place the setup D in the fridge or refrigerator. Okay, this one is quite easy. Name the agent used means what is it dispersed? Because this is a hint here. So this is dispersed by wind. Okay, dispersed by wind. Okay, state one variable that he must keep constant in this experiment. Okay, because you see, he released the fruit from a height, right? So the height of release must be the same. Okay, height of release must be the same. Okay, this question actually came out in PSLE question on some of your prelim paper that you tried. Okay, they say the wire gauze has holes. Why is a piece of wire gauze placed in a container? So I want to give credit to this student. I think her answer is very unique. So I have given you this answer. I want you to try to copy the answer in this area here. Okay, the purpose of this wire gauze is to actually to ensure the seeds, there are so many seeds here, right? They cluster together and stay compact. So it will be easier for the thermometer. You notice the thermometer is sandwiched in between the seeds, right? Easier for the thermometer to record a reliable temperature of the seed. Okay, to record a reliable temperature of the seed. So this answer, I will screenshot this for you and send to you all. Okay. Next part. Okay, as the seed germinate, heat is produced. So what would she observe? Okay, you say that Sui Lan will observe the temperature in the thermometer would increase. Okay, the temperature in the thermometer would increase. Quite easy, yeah. Okay, I will pause this part. So you take note of this. Temperature in the thermometer will increase. Okay, so I would stop this part and pause the video and continue the second section.